22 when I was raped.
I was 19.
I was 20.
I was probably 12. And then anything more serious, I was 16.
I want you to imagine the following situation. You're 7 years old and you come from a family that isn't well off. You have many brothers and sisters and your own parents cannot afford to keep you in the house. So they say, go and live with your uncle who is going to take care of you. This uncle of yours, he runs a madrasa for young children. He's known to be a good and righteous man. You go and live with this uncle and he treats you like one of his own children. He loves you and takes care of you. One day, you're sitting in your room. He comes into the room and he gives you a hug. And that is how it all begins.
He started trying to kiss me and I said no. I was fighting like pretty hard at this point, just saying no, please don't, please don't.
And that's when he raped me.
I figured who's gonna believe some cokehead college girl.
I thought I would just be better off trying to put this behind me.
I kind of froze, like I couldn't even, it's like I felt like I couldn't even walk. Like that's how I felt, like my legs weren't even there.
I didn't know that I was important enough to draw boundaries around what people could and couldn't do with my body.
The next day he comes and he touches you somewhere else. And it becomes more inappropriate, but you're a young child. You don't know what to feel, you don't know what to do, but you know that something is wrong. For 4 years, this continues. And in fact, it actually gets much, much worse. Finally, when you reach the age of 11, you decide that you can't live like this anymore. You need to tell someone, you need to speak out. You go to your parents when you go to visit them. You go to your brothers and sisters, your own blood relatives. You tell them what's going on, and they just absolutely ignore everything you have to say. This individual grows up and cannot have a stable relationship. Every relationship they try to have is sabotaged by the lack of trust they can have in any individual. This individual, she wears niqab, not because she believes it's a religious obligation, but because she believes this is the only way she can live in the world, where she can hide her face and no one can truly know who she is. This sister at the age of 11 tried to commit suicide. She cut her own wrists, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow her to die. This sister at the age of 19 took an overdose of pills. Again, she was taken to the hospital and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow her to die. And she tried it again, one last time, the third time, saying that perhaps this will be the time where her pain will go away. That was all she wanted. She wanted the pain to be taken away. And that is why she sought out death. She tried to commit suicide one more time. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved her once more. She finally decided to get some help and she contacted me. And I thought to myself at that time, how do you take away this individual's pain?
If only 3 out of every 1,000 sexual abusers are charged and convicted, is it really worth reporting the crime?
Who wants to come forward with the literal most violating thing that can happen to you, relive it, and then have people telling you that you're making it up?
I want to start off by saying that the decision to report lies entirely with the person who has been abused and that their decision should be respected. To have to relive a traumatic experience through reporting and potentially again through a trial can be extremely taxing on someone. And anyone who has reported or intends to report should be supported in any way they can and need to be, and commended. because reporting a sexual abuse crime can be beneficial for a number of reasons.
I know the rates of sexual abusers that are actually charged and convicted are disheartening and are shameful. But I still think it's important to report it. I think it's important, one, because the only way that charge and convicted rate is going to go up is if we continue to report.
A lot of people ask whether it's really worth reporting the crime. And this answer really depends on a survivor's individual perspective. We know that perpetrators don't only impact one victim or survivor, it can be many. That being said, going through the legal system itself can be incredibly exhausting and re-triggering. Survivors have to tell and retell their story, often face questions that attempt to debase their experiences. So for me to answer that question, it's really challenging because I don't want to speak on behalf of survivors, but personally I'm very thankful that the legal system does exist for those who decide to pursue that avenue. And also, it really can be limited to people who have the financial means, because as we know, the legal system can be quite costly.
It's up to a survivor to decide what they do with their story. It's up to them if they want to report it or not. And I think it would be wrong to tell them that they don't get to decide what happens next.
They took me before my lieutenant commander. He says, "Do you think this is funny?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Is this all a joke to you?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You're the third girl to report rape this week. Are you guys like all in cahoots? Do you think this is a game?"
As a sexual health educator who has worked in this field for 6 years, and with that it's been entirely within Muslim communities, I have learned that sexual assault and abuse happens within our community at the same rate as national levels in other communities. I've learned that at the same time it goes underreported. We don't do enough prevention work around this topic, and for Muslims specifically, I find that there's a general idea that it doesn't happen because we're Muslim, we're good people, we understand that that's wrong and that's not our problem.
As a counselor, I hear guilt and shame in the voice of victims, but to be honest, it is society that has failed them.
As a therapist, through meeting with hundreds of people, I have learned that sexual assault is very widespread and it cuts across social and economic divides. The other thing that I've learned is that this unfortunately can go on to impact people throughout their life.
Trauma is a long process in terms of someone's impact of having been abused. A lot of times people will dismiss sexual abuse, especially within childhood, and state that, it happened so long ago, why don't you just get over it? But we know that with trauma, the body remembers things that the brain does not. And so trauma is stored within our muscles, within our nerves, and I've seen in working with a lot of survivors that everyone's recovery process and healing journey is different, and trauma can be a lifelong battle that someone is having to fight.
As a Naseeha volunteer, the calls myself and other counselors have answered around sexual abuse are few and far in between. Maybe this is because we're not a crisis line, but I think it's more likely that people are not comfortable talking about it. As a Muslim myself, I don't think sexual abuse gets talked about enough within our community, and when it does, it's my sincere hope that it's addressed in a way that doesn't discourage people, especially victims, from opening up about it more. From the calls that we've received related to sexual abuse, it's clear that much more can be done to support victims, and more needs to be done from a prevention angle.
The investigation was far worse than the rape in so many ways. Our class leader would refer to women as split tail, hey you with the hair. He liked to call us bitches, and feminazi was attributed to me quite frequently.
People that blame victims need to know we cannot shut down or blame those that are not at fault.
People who blame victims need to know that they're escalating the problem by choosing to focus on the victim the way that they do. Their attitudes and opinions towards sexual abuse and its victims can be so damaging to these individuals who are in need of acceptance and support.
Sexual assault and abuse is not about sex, it's about power and control. There's a lot of times people who will blame especially female victims and survivors, saying that she brought it on, she asked for this, she was wearing this, she was saying this, she was doing that. They don't realize that sexual assault and abuse has absolutely nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do with power and control.
To those who blame the victim, I want them to know that no one chooses to lose consent. No one chooses to lose control of their body. No one chooses to have this event go on to impact their ability to work, go to school, and how they socialize.
Last point I would like to make, which is specific to Muslims, is that a lot of times you'll hear Muslim men and women say, well, you need to make 70 excuses for someone before you accuse them of something. And that's absolutely not valid in situations where one person is oppressing another. And so to say that we are going to throw 70 excuses out for a perpetrator of violence is absolutely debaseless within Islam, when we know that our faith tradition strongly advocates for standing up for justice and standing up against oppression.
You're not a victim, you are a survivor.
No matter what anyone says, it is not your fault. You were taken advantage of by someone you trusted. When you are ready, please talk to someone about what happened to you, and perhaps even a professional who may be able to help you work through what happened and minimize the negative impact that such an experience can have on you.
I would tell them that I believe you and it's not your fault. You did absolutely nothing wrong. You didn't deserve this. You didn't bring it on. God is not punishing you.
I want you to know that it is not your fault. I'm going to repeat that. It is not your fault.
I would tell them to take care of yourself. Do everything that you need to make sure you're safe and well. And if you haven't already, please distance yourself from the sexual abuser.
I would also tell them that you need to feel what you need to feel, and that no one can dictate what this journey is. No one can give you a time limit. No one can make you feel less about yourself in terms of your healing journey.
And finally, remember to move on from this and continue to live a life that brings you purpose and joy.
For survivors, it's really just, hopefully at this point they've heard it several times, but that idea of like, it's not your fault. Like, I think you can't hear that enough, because it takes a while, like just hearing it versus internalizing it and really believing that for yourself.
And I hadn't told anybody for over 30 years. But on the day I told my wife, I sat there on the edge of the bed and told her I had to tell her something.
I felt this feeling in my stomach of horror.
I broke down crying. You know, I was crying, but after she was hugging me, I felt like someone took this great weight off of me. I mean, it was like tears of joy at that point, you know? To have this secret released from me. I tried to commit suicide 4 times. All 4 times, I didn't die.
Since then, I've gone through, I'm a counselor on a rape crisis hotline, and sort of the mantra is listen, believe, support. People's tendencies are to ask a lot of questions or want to know the details around like what happened and why, and that why can get hurtful really quickly. Asking questions in the form of, you know, what would be most helpful right now, or what would you like to do, you know, can I do anything? Those are okay questions because they're not about the event, but they're about next steps that are very gentle, and make sure that whatever happens is decided by the person who just disclosed.
I don't want people to suffer like I suffered. I don't want them to wait 30 years before they get help.
You just tell your truth, as painful as it may be sometimes, so that it just might touch something in somebody else. It just might set up a thought like, well, maybe I can go get help. If they can do it, maybe we can do it. Maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe there is hope out there, and there is.